This one is known as the Duesenberg of motorcycles. These motorcycles were collected from around the world. Now they'll be dispersed at auction around the world. Here at the National Motorcycle Museum, this is a top-notch collection of bikes all the way back to the early 1900s. And this is the last time this collection will be together. It's being liquidated at auction by Meekum. This is the walk around. One last look before it's all dispersed. There's some amazing displays in here, including the board track. A couple bikes in this collection have caught my interest, so I'm going to take a walk through the rooms in the museum and find them, check them out. John Parham was very passionate about these motorcycles. He collected all brands, and his intention was to show the history of them. They had a motorcycle parts business that was J&P Cycles. He did very well at that and took the money that he made and built this museum, collected the bikes. The airplane was taken apart and moved in here. Airplane's fascinating just because it's so early, so close to when the Wright brothers built theirs. The engine is actually not a radial engine. It's this Gnome Omega rotary. So the entire engine spins. You can see the gear set in the back. It's really fascinating technology. There's some waning interest in pre-war vehicles in general. A lot of that has to do with the people that were into them just aging out and passing on. I'm personally fascinated with anything pre-war just because the technology is so unique. In a lot of ways, technology is art. So for me, the purpose of this video isn't necessarily to exhaustively show every last piece that's here. Really, for this weekend, together for the last time before the collection sold. Friends of mine have asked me, "You're not a motorcycle guy, why are you interested in going to this sale?" And for me, I've looked through the catalog, looked through some of the pre-sale estimates, and I do think there's a couple pieces in here that to me seem like they'd have potential for selling under market. There's 300 bikes here, and with that amount, I think there's a chance that some of them could sell under market, and if a guy doesn't head out and take a look, then you don't know what'll happen. So I loaded up and took a chance to see if I can get one bought. So next video after this walk around, I'll show if I was successful, or if I wasn't, the next video will be back to regularly scheduled junkyards and farm sales and rough stuff like I usually show. With that, I'm gonna keep walking around the museum. Again, I'm not an expert on these, so I won't narrate much. I'll just show some of the vehicles that are here and show what the cards say, because the people that collected these are more knowledgeable than I am. Before I do that, catch the Henderson cycle car here real quick. This one was shown on American Pickers, and they found this, brought it here and sold it to John. That's an episode. Been told that it's pretty easy to look them up and find them on the History Channel if you know the name, but I don't know the name of that particular one. And another super fascinating one. This started out as Harley-Davidson Cervicar, which was basically a three-wheeled motorcycle with a little cabinet on the back that they would take out to the customers with all the tools, and they could fix a motorcycle on site. Now, this particular one is built out of salvaged car bodies, and you can see there's over a dozen different cars they cut up to make this. Front fenders and grille are 46 Oldsmobile. Front bumper is a Jeep. And the other parts, really anybody's guess. So these earliest motorcycles were based on bicycles, and motorcycle pretty much developed about the same time that the horseless carriage and the motor cars did. And these earlier ones had the leather belt with the big pulley on the back tire, and most of these you would start them, and then there was a kickstand, you'd drop that down and go. And this one doesn't have that type of stand, but a lot of them you just drop that stand and away you go. The engineering took off pretty quick on these. They got clutches and chain drive with sprockets, and so these early bikes, there just really wasn't a whole lot of use for them after technology improved, and so a lot of the early ones got either cut up or scrapped. And it was a lot easier to scrap a motorcycle than it was a car, because the cars had wood bodies, and you had to basically take the gas tank, they'd poke it and drain the fuel out of an old car. They'd soak the seats and the top, and they'd light it on fire and burn everything out in the scrap yards. And then they would take the frames and the bodies and shove them all in the pile for iron. And so that's where the term auto wrecking came from. Where that plays into the importance of these motorcycles is that a motorcycle was just metal. And so you could pick the thing up, toss it in the scrap load, and most of these early bikes that have survived, it was not necessarily intentional. They either got tucked away in barns or they just somehow escaped being melted down. And the other thing too was World War II, the scrap drives, a lot of this early stuff, there just wasn't a lot of use for it. Some of them though, they did pull the engines off, and so there are a lot more surviving engines for early bikes and then there are frames and other parts. And so a lot of these early bikes, you can actually take an original engine and you can build the rest of the bike around it. So there's a couple replica bikes in here, which is this Flying Merkel and the Cyclone. The Cyclone is presented as a fresh build, fresh restoration in appearance. And the Merkel is too, but the Merkel you can see they've put distressed or aged looking paint on it. So all of this paint is brand new on here. It's just aged down either with salt or with tape to peel off little chips. They'll hit it with chains or tools to put chips on it as well. And some of these they'll just put kind of a wash of varnish to give it a darkened patina to it. And there's a mix of original parts on here, like the acetylene headlight. But the engine really is the core piece that you need to put one of these together. The motorcycle grew up, and after the bicycle style frames, they got more rugged, durable, dedicated bike frames, and motorcycle in general just became faster and more capable, and a lot of people would ride these around, or clubs that started up. And there was just a real camaraderie of people that would go out and ride together. So your dominant American brands were Harley and Indian. Before that, there were others like Excelsior and Thor, Henderson, but Harley really was the dominant one. Early motorcyclists, for the most part, were conscientious and clean and respectable. But after World War II, a lot of the GIs came back from fighting, and there was just a lot of residual thirst for adventure, for speed, just for the thrill of doing the things that they had in wartime. So a lot of your motorcyclists would do racing, and there's an event that kind of really changed the look of motorcycling to the general public as a whole, and that was in 1947 in California. There was a riot in Hollister. It was a little bit sensationalized, and bikes real similar to this 1937 model were ones that they rode, There's a Life magazine article in 1947 about it, and it was kind of hastily written. Some of it was accurate, some of it probably was sensationalized. And so from that time, the motorcyclists really got a reputation as being pretty wild outlaws, and some of them were. So that whole theme was exploited somewhat through movies in the 60s. And you can see some of the early customization that started on them, such as this one that was Steve McQueen's. So here is the Dragon bike that Peter Fonda rode in Wild Angels. Now both of these Easy Rider motorcycles are replicas. Motorcycle customization really took off after World War II. In the 60s, 70s, and beyond, just kept getting more wild. This is Ed Roth's Asphalt Angel. Once you have a lot of these customization shops taking off, sometimes the guys who build them, they almost acquire a bigger persona than the bikes themselves. Here's an ice boat. This was built from a motorcycle using plans that came out of a popular mechanics magazine. Definite oddity for sure.
T246 Diamond, Phillips 66, Mobile Oak, Cans, lot of 3. $100 and a half bid, you're gonna get $200 bid, you're gonna get $2 bid, you're gonna get $200 bid, you're gonna get $200, you get $200 bid, you're gonna get 200, and $200 bid, you're gonna get 2 bid, you're gonna get 2 here, you're gonna get 200, so $150, Katie. T247 Miscellaneous Service Station Memorabilia, lot of 19, and $500 bid, you're gonna get $600, you're gonna get 5 bid, you're gonna get 600, $700 bid, you're gonna get 7 bid, you're gonna get 7, you're gonna get 7, you're gonna get 7 here, you're gonna get $500 bid, you're gonna get 500, $600.
So here's the first of the motorcycles I've had my eye on. This is a Ferrari, of course not associated with the automobile manufacturer, and they actually told the brothers that were building these they'd rather they stop, and so they did. So it has a short production sequence, not a whole lot of them around. This one, pretty average restoration, has a few little chips and things that aren't quite right on it, but still just a fascinating bike for the history of it. Back in 2021, the Top Mountain Motorcycle Museum in Austria burned, and that's been rebuilt. So I know that the Scheiber brothers are here, and they'll be looking to buy some bikes to restock that museum. So normally in the US you wouldn't have a great amount of market interest in European bikes, but with those brothers being here to acquire more for their museum, I know the market on the European bikes at this sale is going to be a little bit different than most. These motorcycles were collected from around the world. Now they'll be dispersed at auction around the world. Here's a Indian 4. This one is known as the Duesenberg of motorcycles. Yeah, this is the section of the most rare and special bikes, at least to John personally. And probably a lot of them because of rarity and historical significance. The collection has a couple of these Bruff motorcycles. These were British bike, and they were called the Rolls-Royce of motorcycles, which Rolls-Royce didn't really have a problem with. They were very well engineered, very well built, and one of the guys here at the sale was telling me the factory would select all the parts out of the parts bin, build the bikes, and then they'd test ride them. Once they were satisfied everything was good, they'd take them apart, and then they would fully paint them and assemble them. Now, this Maserati really fascinated me just because of the history of the company. Of course, this is a post-war Italian bike. The Maserati company had actually a foundry division and a spark plug division in addition to the automobile manufacturing. And after the war, those were split, and each of the brothers got the foundry and the car divisions. And then Ida, the sister, got the spark plug division. Under that spark plug division, they acquired Atal Moto and the manufacturing of those motorcycles, which they put the Maserati name on. Now, this specific bike is restored to better than new condition, and it actually competed in the Pebble Beach Concourse, so it's probably one of the best restored motorcycles in this collection. I've definitely got my eye on it. We'll see what happens. Here's the Shaw motorized bicycle. This one was Kansas built. These are the World War II era bikes.
Crazy.
There's been other videos shot of this museum that are on YouTube, so this isn't necessarily intended to be a complete, exhaustive look at what's here, but this probably will be one of the last, if not the last, YouTube videos shot here at the museum. And this is just kind of showing process of the sale and the crowd here. I'm not really an expert on these bikes, so any of these, stop the video and read the cards. VSA is a very interesting one just because one of their factories was bombed, direct hit from the Germans in World War II, and they kept production going in the other factories, and the M20 was pretty widely produced motorcycle. There's a lot of pre-war bikes, a lot of World War II bikes, a lot of post-war bikes, post-war racing bikes. This diesel Kawasaki military bike, very, very interesting one. They did production for the military. Out of all the motorcycles in the whole collection, this one's my very favorite. It's actually a German bike. Now they've got it listed as a 1933, but the 601 actually wasn't built until 1938. And of course that was when Germany was getting heavily militarized. The Nazi government actually would get an example of each production motorcycle available at any time, and they would put them through their tests, and the 601 actually performed so well that they contracted with NSU to take the entire production of those bikes and put for military service. So this one is incredibly rare, considering that 6 more years of war took a lot of them out. And the other rarity of this bike is that it's restored to a civilian configuration.